Allan Trautman is a puppeteer working as lead puppeteer and puppetry technique instructor for the Jim Henson Company and in feature films, television and commercials with The Muppets and many other productions. He's performed in over 250 primetime series episodes as a lead character and performed lead characters in many feature films. And we've got him on the line here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah. So, how did you get involved in performing in the first place?
Performing is something, boy, that I've just always wanted to do. I'm just naturally kind of a ham, and there's probably some deep well of need in my soul that that is filled by getting in front of people and having them look at me. um, but I've just always enjoyed getting a laugh out of people. I just really enjoy seeing people smile, and I put those two things together.
Yeah.
I guess it was inevitable that I ended up on stage one way or another.
Yeah. And when you became a puppeteer, did you require any training for that, or had you kind of practiced
Oh,
before?
yeah. Well, nowadays there's lots of ways to train to be a puppeteer, which, let's face it, is a pretty specialized field
Yeah.
and pretty specialized skill.
Mm.
But when I was coming up, this was back when I was in college, and in the very early '70s. And back then, Sesame Street had been on the air for like 2 or 3 years.
Mm.
And so that style of puppetry, the Henson style of using TV monitor and with puppets that work well on a TV screen, was all relatively new, and they had basically invented a new style of puppetry, and that's when I started doing it. And so I just lucked out basically by auditioning for this public TV show that was looking for puppeteers, but
Mm.
realized that there probably weren't a lot of trained puppeteers around. This was in St. Louis, especially. It's
Yeah.
not like you're in New York or London, where Henson had worked before, and so they were willing to train people to be puppeteers who could do voices.
Mm.
And voices is something I knew I was pretty good at.
Yeah.
So I auditioned, and they stuck a puppet on my hand to see if I had any aptitude at all.
Yeah.
And it just became one of those things where I sort of just knew what to do instinctually.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any formal training, but it was a lot of on the job training. And there were two people there who were more experienced than I was, and they gave me pointers.
Mm.
But it was learn as you go. And boy, just recently I saw an old YouTube video of one of these early episodes of this TV series that I did. It
Wow.
was called The Letter People. And I looked at it. I said, "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassing. What am I doing? I didn't know anything. I'm just looking at this and cringing." But over the
Mm.
years, I got better.
Yeah. It's probably a good thing to look back on your old work and cringe because it means you've improved at the very least.
Yes, yes, it's tough to watch, and
Yeah.
you have to just turn it off after a minute. But I guess what I did notice was just sort of my gumption, my
Yeah.
my enjoyment of the work, and my ability to just sort of dive into a character and to a situation, and
Yeah.
that is something that I guess I've always had, and it's always served me well for
Mm.
being able to do the kind of work I've been doing all along now.
Yeah. And when did you discover that you were good at doing voices? I mean, had you done impressions of people or was it just funny voices?
Yeah, I didn't really do impressions, but I when I was in high school, there was a group called the Firesign Theater,
Mm.
and they were doing these basically like radio theater type productions, but applying the types of kind of psychedelic late 60s recording techniques, multi-tracking and layering
Yeah.
that the Beatles were pioneering, and just applying it to essentially like radio drama. And if you've never heard the Firesign Theater, they you really should check them out. They're a
Mm.
seminal Los Angeles group that they did. They were basically like four DJs and voiceover artists who wrote all of this material and performed it live, and then did these recordings that were just mind bending.
Yeah.
And you know, for an impressionable high school student, I had a couple of friends who were uh, all three of us were like totally into the Firesign Theater, and we would just do perform entire album sides on our own, you know.
Yeah.
And it was great training for doing character voices.
Yeah.
And basically, that's the type of thing I did for my audition. I just did this kaleidoscope of voices, and they were like, I don't know what to make of this kid, but he certainly has some energy.
Yeah. And one of your early roles was playing the Tarman in Return of the Living Dead.
Oh,
How did you get that role?
well, that was quite a few years after college. I was working as an actor and sometimes puppeteer. This was in the early '80s,
Yeah.
and I had done work as a puppeteer. I had actually had some little more training by then, and had started working both as an actor and as a puppeteer. I went to California Institute of the Arts for my master's in acting, and so I was looking to become a stage actor and hopefully break into film and TV. And I knew I was never going to be like a leading man. I was always going to be like a character actor. So I figured I had a long road ahead of me that where I could ramp up, and I know a lot of character actors don't come into their own until they're middle age. So I was happy to do what I could at the time, and one of the auditions I got as an actor through my agent was this Return of the Living Dead thing, which I looked at the. I don't know if I had a script beforehand or if I just saw the one scene I was in, and I'm like, all right. I saw this thing where he's this zombie and he's like falling apart because he's all just like liquefying, and he doesn't really have any muscles left, and yet he's strong enough to like bite into people's skulls and eat their brains. And I'm like, okay, I've got a couple of questions here. How does that work? What? How does he have the strength? And then I, realized very quickly that those aren't the right questions to be asking for this, and that I should just take it at face value. It's a zombie film, and I should just be as scary
Yeah.
and menacing as possible. And it's the type of role where I think, having done some puppet work, informed my audition, because I understood how a body's movement, how my body movement could work to sell the power, the scariness of this creature. You
Yeah.
know. because it's really basically a full body puppet is what it is,
Mm,
and that's kind of what I treated it as. So
yeah.
it worked out.
Yeah. And of course, in that role, you're unrecognizable, really. So, how
Yeah, yeah.
long did it take you to, go into makeup and get all that done?
Well, luckily, the whole look of the thing was, a lot of times it's extensive prosthetic work where they're gluing little bits of stuff all over your face.
Yeah.
But in this case, everything was sort of pre-made.
Mm.
The whole head was just kind of like a Darth Vader helmet that was pre-made. The body was just a suit that I put on, top and bottom, and some
Mm.
gloves and shoes. So it didn't really take me that long to get into it, thankfully.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would have been one of those things where I'm sitting in a chair for 4 hours
Yeah.
getting into it and then
Yeah.
very carefully removing these things. But it helped that I was or just this really tall, skinny kid at that point.
Yeah.
Well, I was 29, but
Mm.
I was, really just kind of skinny. And so they were able to put this suit on me that, and still make it look like I was just bones sticking out.
Yeah.
It was believable. So it was a fortuitous thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they still got me into makeup. They got me into my costume like hours before I was needed, and I just remember
Mm.
sitting around forever on the set, which you couldn't really sit in a chair. I was on a slant board, and I couldn't really
Mm.
do anything. And um, uh, people would just sort of walk by and not want to talk to me because they didn't know what that thing was.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of mind control there. I learned how to meditate very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. And you got maybe what could be called your big break in puppetry when you started working with the Jim Henson Company. How did you
Yeah.
get the chance to work for, at that time, is probably the biggest
Oh,
puppetry
sure.
company?
Oh, absolutely. It was luck.
Mm.
Um, Fortunately, when I had started working in LA as a puppeteer, I met a number of other puppeteers. It's a small group of people, and we all work together all
Mm.
frequently, and we look out for each other. And we mention when there are jobs coming up. Um, Henson was at that time doing most of his work in London and New York,
Mm.
but he was coming out to LA to do the Muppet Vision 3D film, which
Oh, yeah.
played at I think it that premiered in Florida at the theme park, and then it was like California Adventure. It was a wonderful ride. It was one of these 3D movies with animatronics and effects and all these other things that happened in the theater,
Yeah.
and it needed a large cast, and so they were casting people for the first time in LA in a long time since they did the first. I think it was the first Muppet movie. They had a couple of bits that they did in LA. In
Wow.
any event, they needed like 25 LA puppeteers, and just luck, as luck would have it, one of my puppeteer friends, his wife was the choreographer for the suit performers who were doing the live Muppet stage productions at Disneyland.
Oh.
Okay. So, yeah, it was one of those things. So she knew about it. So he knew about it. And then he told me about it. And he said, I can get your name on the audition list. I said, sure. Yeah, please. And thankfully, that led to basically the rest of my career.
Yeah. And you joined the Jim Henson Company in early 1990, and of
Yeah.
course, Jim Henson died in May 1990. So there's a
Yes.
bit of a window there. Did you get a chance to meet him?
I did. We worked, obviously, he was directing the Muppet Vision 3D. And then there were four of us LA puppeteers who were being used to basically test out various portions of the cut of the film, where they wanted to see what it would look like with all of the animatronic characters. So, for example, Statler and Waldorf were going to be two animatronics that popped up in the box. It was a recreation of the actual Muppet Theater, you know.
Yeah.
And so, before all of those things were built, they just wanted to run the show and look at the cut. And so they just had the actual puppets there, and the voices were all pre-recorded. And so there were four of us LA puppeteers who would work on these screenings. So, you know, all the bigwigs would come in, the CEOs and all of that would come in to view the cut, and we would just lip sync to Statler and Waldorf, me and my friend Kevin Carlson, and of course, so that was just working, you know, basically directly with Jim to stage these things. And it was very awkward at first with the four of us just standing around in the same room with him. It was like, man, what do you say to somebody like that? It just came out gibberish, I think. I just really embarrassed myself. But it was a great experience. And unfortunately, he then passed away in May before the cut was locked, and Frank Oz took over eventually, and we did, I think, one more screening with Frank's cut, which ended up being, if not the cut, or something close to the end. And so yeah, it was a I got to see how he worked, at least when he was directing this big. If you've seen the film, it's this big, huge finale with hundreds of puppets on it. It's just crazy.
Yeah, is that the one that's a salute to all nations, but mostly America?
Yes, and it had, you know, marching soldiers with the firing with the cannons and the marching bands, and it's just insane.
Yeah, and did you get starstruck when you met Jim Henson, and indeed some of the other performers like Frank Oz maybe, and performers that have created and brought to life such iconic characters?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It was, we didn't have too much to do with them directly, but all of the interactions I did have were just top notch. They were all just so accommodating and kind and giving. I remember there was one shot where it was a line of, I don't know, half a dozen of these toy soldiers, and I was like in the front of the line, and right next to me was a cannon that goes off, right? So, and then we like hold the guns up or something like that. I don't know what the action was. So it was me and then Steve Whitmire and Dave Goles, and we're just like, you know, I'm like, holy moly, I'm in the big leagues now. And so I said to Steve, who's standing next to me, I go, Steve, shouldn't we like, I was thinking I should react when this thing goes up. It's standing right next to me. I should like look at it or get scared or something. He goes, oh yeah, it's a good idea. Let's mention it to Jim. So he says, Jim comes over. He says, Jim, and he gave me total credit. He says, Allan had a great idea that maybe he should react when the cannon goes off and jump a little bit. And Jim says, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Steve, you do that. So we switched places. And so Steve did that. I said, all right, well, I guess that's how that works. But, you know, that was one of the ways Jim was able to maintain quality control when there were so many moving parts. He just wanted to have his best people in the most critical positions, so he didn't have to think about anything else or worry about anything else. So it
Yeah.
wasn't that he didn't trust the newcomers, but that he knew who to trust, you know. So that was an
Yeah.
interesting lesson there.
Yeah. And is there anything about puppetry that you've only really learned yourself recently?
Wow. Um, it's at this stage of the game, it's not so much learning things new as it is maybe relearning some things that I may have let uh, slip under the radar.
Mm.
Um, Early on, I remember when I first did uh, dinosaurs, I had stage experience. And so,
Yeah.
as a stage actor, you memorize all your lines. That's just all there is to it. But as a puppeteer, you're not on camera and you're
Mm.
working with a monitor. You're looking at the TV monitor the whole time. And most puppeteers will just pin the lines next to the monitor so
Yeah.
they can use it as a guide. They may not stare at it because you can't stare at the lines while you're trying to look at the performance on the
Mm.
monitor. But you go back and forth and you refer to it. And after a few takes, if you get a few takes, you don't really need them anymore. You learn how to focus on the being in the moment, which is the most crucial thing of all in terms of good acting.
Yeah.
And the Muppets are if nothing if not good actors.
Yeah.
They're always in the moment. They're always present. And if everybody were always reading off of a script, it wouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
So when I was doing my first day, I remember on dinosaurs, I was like, okay, I've memorized the script. And of course, on the first take, dinosaurs was just this huge production. It was the most
Mm.
expensive half-hour television on TV at the time in history.
Wow.
And we were all feeling the pressure. It was my first network
Mm.
television job, day one of shooting, and I was trying to memorize the script. So I didn't even have the script up there to look at. And of
Wow.
course, we rolled and I went up on my lines because it was just so disorienting, the whole thing. So from that moment on, I always had the dialogue up there. But the tendency after a while is to want to rely on the script and not do the
Yeah.
prep work, you know? So you sort of skim the lines and the thing, and then you can kind of keep it fresh if it's a poppy kind of jokey dialogue. And
Yeah.
honestly, the a lot of dinosaurs was like that, and so you could get away with that. But and it's just easy to do that for everything. But I on the Barbarian and the Troll, one of the last things I did, which was a Nickelodeon series. I did a couple of characters that I just loved, and I really wanted to, and I had full control over.
Mm.
Unlike a lot of the animatronics, where it's three or four puppeteers doing one character, and one of them is doing the eyes, and one of them is doing the lips. With this, it was a hand puppet that I had full control over. And so I really wanted to do the best job I could and keep it really in the moment. So
Yeah.
I went back to basics on that, and I said, I am going to not pin up my dialogue. I only did it once or twice when it was like really heavy
Yeah.
dialogue. I had a lot to say, and I knew I didn't want to blow it too many times in a row. But I was able to, yeah, I went up on my lines once or twice,
Mm.
but it's okay. It's what happens because it paid off in the performance. It was some of the most in the moment, alive kind of character work I think I've done. I was really, really pleased with the finished product as a result. And so that was, I guess, something I relearned over the years, the importance of being in the monitor and being in the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. Sue, what projects have you got coming up for you? Is there anything you're allowed to talk about?
No. Well, you know what? They just announced for Apple TV Plus
Oh.
a new series called Slumberkins, which is coming up in October. Maybe I don't know where it is in the UK, but
Yeah.
what time when it's going to air in the UK. But it's a wonderful show that addresses the emotional needs of young children. So
Mm.
it's a basically like a preschool or young kindergartenish age range, but it uses this very interesting sort of technique. It teaches kids how to almost like objectify their emotions so they can look
Yeah.
at them and say, okay, here's how I'm feeling. What am I, how am I, going to control this? And getting kids to learn about how to live with their emotions, which is such
Mm.
a fantastic um, uh, project to explore. Um, so I didn't do the entire series of that. I wasn't a regular on that, but I did work
Yeah.
on a number of episodes, and so I just want to let people know about it because I think it's really wonderful. If you have younger kids, it's a great show to teach them how to deal with their emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where are we able to keep up to date with you everywhere?
I'm on Instagram. Just it's all about just my name, Alan Troutman, but you got to spell it right:
Yeah. Yes.
ALLAN
Not trout
um,
like a fish.
no, no. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I even have a separate for a Facebook page for my Tarman fans called Allan's
Mm.
Fans. So you can look that up. Twitter is Allan Troutman. It's also just basically allantroutman.com if you want a good overview of what my whole uh, oeuvre looks like.
Yes. Great. Well, many thanks for joining us today. It's been great to talk to you.
My pleasure.